Part of what we still connect to is the ignorance, and that ignorance is self-inflicted ignorance as well as taught ignorance. And so we'll do stuff like start a business, and then the first thing we do is go buy a big car instead of reinvest back into the business. Or we'll go buy a house on a 30-year mortgage because they say we can afford the payments, and then we pay three, four, five times more than we should have paid if we'd have got a 10-year mortgage and bought less house.
Right.
Bought a
Because what
chain with our advance money.
it exactly so bought a chain with our advance money. That's us. And part of that is because we got our freedom when political scientists, when social scientists were trying to figure out how to make us consumers. That's what they were trying to figure out how to do. How do we keep low wage workers? How do we keep slave workers? What do we do? We have this free market economy. You know what? Let's give women a vote. Let's put them out there in public. Now, keep in mind, they make decisions for their grandkids to benefit. We make decisions for us to be able to hit the club Friday.
I
So
said
sometimes,
week.
right. So sometimes we don't understand the concepts and how long things take to move and shake. So they started having these conversations. When you go back and read the papers, when you go back and read Congress and the bills and stuff that they were proposing, even ones that didn't pass, once you go back and you truly study the economics of America, then you understand why 50 years later women were able to vote. Then you understand why the big social experiment was bringing women into the workforce when you had a bunch of prisoners that could have did the same thing. So while the men are fighting in World War II, instead of allowing the prisoners to make planes and build this stuff, they put women out there and made these great marketing photos, and now women feel like, oh, I can make decisions, I earn money, I'm empowered. It's all these type of things that are 50, 60, 70-year processes. We don't understand making decisions that
You're listening to the Bean Pie Chronicles podcast. So kick off your leather socks and unpin your head wrap. The Bean Pie Chronicles is now on the air.
Assalamu alaikum. Back at a new episode of Bean Pie Chronicles. I'm joined today with my man Khalil Fifth Element and the brother Riyadh, the madman economist, Muslim economist. What's going on, fellas? How's everything?
All gravy.
I don't think we did a recording episode past Ramadan, so that everybody, Ramadan came and gone. There's some events, there's some Eid events, there's some cultural events that happened around the Eid that just passed. Had a lot of us having conversations about, culture and what is culture, because Islam, we all have these holidays and rituals that we all share with Muslims throughout the world, but then there's a cultural expression that each tradition or each community kind of expresses and celebrates and does things somewhat on their own or uniquely in their own way. And the events that took place down in Durham and Atlanta, in these African American communities, I'm assuming all over America, sort of had an African American flair to them, And the one in where was that? I think in Atlanta, an Atlanta joint. There was a big hip hop component, and what we would call hip hop component. Well, that's another discussion. So that got us into the conversation about ownership and culture and cultural identity, and this is something that we're always talking about at Bean Pie Chronicles, but on certain situations, highlights the state of confusion, I would say, with regards to the African American Muslim and having his distinguished cultural identity and cultural practices that are not just open source for everybody who is Muslim to make claim of these things, And I think that what it brought into short review for me is that the fact that African Americans, unlike I would say anybody else on the face of the planet, you know, we're operating in a unique situation in that our operating system, what we call black culture, is actually a symbiotic creation. It's not, I would say, natural. People always argue with me and say, oh, what's unnatural, what's natural culture. If you, for instance, we eat chitlins, let's say that's something definitive from African American culture.
Right.
I would say that wasn't a decision made by our ancestors to say, out of all the animals on the planet, let's eat this pork. And out of all the parts of the pig, let's eat the guts. That wasn't a decision that was made. That was the pig, eating the pig was the European, the white man's way. And you having guts to eat was his, what he discarded. I don't want that. I want the pork chop. I want the roast. I want the rump roast. I want the ribs. Y'all, here's the guts. Now, the fact that our ancestors went and made chitlins out of it, and now that is considered black culture, is what I'm saying. It's a symbiotic. It's not natural. It's not sovereign. It's an adaptation. It's a maladjustment to conditions.
Let me ask you this. Is, in that same train of thought then, is the bean pie the antithesis to that?
I would say yes.
I agree.
Absolutely.
I would say yes. And that's why I say even let's say in black culture, mainstream black culture, you typically have bean pie referenced almost in a comical way. Like it's usually like a butt of a joke, or somebody references it in
Black Muslim,
or like in a rap song. It's there. It's a constant, but it's not really elevated to the status that it deserves because of what you just pointed out. It's an original product. It's original as jazz. It's as original as hip hop. It's a quintessential. It's probably only the only American dessert. Because people say
it's not adaptation. It's like you
consciously made it.
This is the ingredients
right.
that I want to use, and I want to be vegan with it.
Right. So the apple pie, when they say Americans apple pie actually is a French creation. The bean pie is actually American. And so that's the unique thing about that product, right?
But as a segue, that's also what I mentioned earlier, before we got on there, about the fact that things that African Americans contribute to culture, it's usually so impactful or so beneficial, right, that everybody wants a piece of it, to where it's almost like we're not allowed to keep black culture for ourselves. It's like hip hop. No, you got to share that with the world. You don't hear them saying that with salsa, right? You don't hear them saying that with opera or anything like that. But it's like whatever it is that we create, they definitely say, as you were saying before, I guess that property can't own property, but it's always like we are appropriated by others to where we don't necessarily get an opportunity to say that this is distinctly ours. It always has to say, oh no, this is American, period. It's just American.
But I think part of that also has to do with the fact that we're very, as a people, we're very pop culture oriented, and partly has to do with the fact we only, when you think about us, the emancipation and the freeing of, or the ending of slavery, it was during a time that there was an economic boom. And so the only thing about America that we've known is this big push towards consumerism. And it's just grown and grown and grown more. So whereas other people have this historical context to what they love, to their foods, to the way they practice their religious beliefs and stuff. Everything that we love is a pop culture fad type, consumer type thing. So we don't value as a people. And this is something that Idris and I talk about is we have to fix the nigga before we can move on to other stuff. So so this is part of that I guess that nigga behavior in us that we need to get rid of is we don't value the bean pie in the way that the French value the croissant,
Right.
or that the Welsh, or I think it might be Welsh. I don't want to make nobody mad. Whoever over in Europe, the way that they value haggis, like haggis sounds so disgusting to me, but these group of Europeans over there in the UK somewhere
With
love
pride.
haggis
With
with
pride.
with absolute pride. So they live and they develop these taste buds and these ideas about who they are prior to being consumers. We didn't have a choice, and then we became consumers. And so that, to me, that's the reason why we allow people to appropriate things, because we're always looking for the new thing that makes us the peacock, that makes us the new. That's the part of our culture that we gravitated towards, as opposed to truly establishing these things that give us a foothold um, in the world.
Hmm. Well,
Well, let me just ask this one thing though. You said the peacock aspect, but is it fair to say, because I've heard this argument before, that like for instance, the likes of a Jack Johnson, right? You know, he came into that heavyweight new championship era in the early 1900s, and he was classified as a quote unquote new Negro, right? And when I saw pictures of him, he's over there. He got his furs on. He got his gold tooth in his mouth. You know, he got a couple of women around him. He got the fast cars. Is I've heard that that is kind of like a genealogical expression of like when we actually were quote unquote kings and queens and were adorned with big gold ropes and chains and stuff around our necks and stuff like that. So one of the things is I'll ask you guys this. One of the things that I have debated with some of my elders about is I felt that they dropped the ball during the 60s, during the revolutionary period with that word nigga. Because the word, you know, descends from this word Niger or negus, which means royalty. So it's like, why would I automatically accept what, although, you know, there is a slave owner who did put a negative energy on something that once was positive. How do we not reclaim that word and its original meaning so as to even purify the nigga expression, if you will, that seems to want to come out kind of genetically, where do like, yo, as soon as I get on, I need that chain, I need to be adorned with the finest of fabrics. I mean, like that's something that goes all the way back in the days. I even heard my man Black Dot from Urban X. He said like when you heard the mumble rap, that was like channeling like the jazz stuff where folks was scatting back in the days. They wasn't necessarily saying shop what is that? You know what I'm saying? But they sure enough was making a rhythm with it. So it's like there's different reincarnations of the energy. So that's what I ask you guys is, did we drop the ball with that word nigga or nigga, so the real energy or meaning behind the word, by going with what a quote unquote America tried to tell us the word?
Well, we can definitely, go back in and find fallacy and find malintent in the etymology of words. And that's something we possibly all could do better. But when you look at what you're talking about, first of all, let's exclude one fallacy. In the history of American slavery, how many princes or kings do we know of? I mean, there was a book written about one, a Muslim brother that was a prince, and then he decided to stay a slave and stuff, which is crazy to me. But and then besides him, I can't think of another king, prince, or whatever. And the fact of the matter is that the slaves that were brought over here weren't kings and princes and
I've
queens.
heard that.
we were the ones getting hit over the head on the countryside and sold into slavery, or we were the warriors, the low-level warriors that got traded, and the other country decided, nah, we'll just trade them off if we can end this
I
war.
heard that we were they wanted the builders of the pyramids to build this country.
Yeah, so this idea, I mean, and in some ways, calling yourself kings and queens and stuff like that can be something positive because we get so much negativity. But the truth of the matter is that the slaves over here, we were the workers, we were the strong, we were the people that kept the community going, which isn't the leaders. We weren't the ones in the palaces. We were the ones out in the fields working. We were tending fields and planting rice and doing all that stuff over there, and they brought us over here, and we were doing the same thing here. Now we are of strong stock, and so of all the enslaved people that were brought to the new world, we are the strongest because we were the ones that were taking off the ship last. So the ones that were almost dying hit the Caribbeans, hit the other islands and stuff like that because they were almost dead. We got to sell them. We got to sell them before they die. The strong ones were the ones because this was the last stop. So only the strong ones made it to America. So that's our stop. And so instead of taking pride in that, we'll flip it and say, okay, well, we were kings and queens. No, we weren't. It was only so many kings and queens and princes and high levels chiefs and stuff on the continent. So it wasn't at one point it was 2 million enslaved people brought over here. Now there was a whole lot more slaves, but we won't talk about the math. But according to the books, there were 2 million slaves or enslaved people that were brought over here. So it wasn't
don't
2
forget
million
about
things.
the free Moors. Don't forget about the free Moors.
Well, there were Africans here beforehand, so we not. That's what I'm saying. We won't talk about the numbers. We're talking about.
That's what I'm saying. Aren't those potentially like the? Okay, so I'm not saying like we like you only got to go 2 generations back and we're like connected with royalty in that respect. But I mean to say that, like for instance, when my mom did her little genealogy thing with National Geographic with the Scientific Adam, they said that only 15% of the world's population could trace their ancestry back to that quote unquote scientific Adam in southern Ethiopia. They said that African Americans, 85% of them fit into that 15%. So, I mean, to say that, like, back in Hotep days, even that it happened to be that, that's where we all happen to, forge back to, but that we, as you said, we come from the best stock, bro. Like, it's not
right,
just
but it's not kings
stock.
and queens.
But here's the thing. If we're talking about, that's definitely the case. You can't have 15 million kings and queens. It doesn't make sense. But the thing is, when people talk about genetics, DNA, as if, things that we do now, what defines African Americans and other people from the diaspora is the fact that in various degrees, we don't have any connection to that reality. Your physical body, aside from your physical body and what epigenetics would have created in your DNA, your conscious connection to those realities, like all of us, our names, our last names, are not traditional to anything. What African country or tribe, more specifically, anybody belong to is unknown. The behavior and the traditions, the cultural values of anybody's tribe and condition is unknown.
Okay, hold on. Can I put a special asterisk on that? You are correct. I do agree. I would just say, except for those of us that have made the conscious decision to go over there.
You can go wherever you want to go. You could go to Japan. That'll make you a Japanese. You can go where the hell you want to go to.
But like as an example, I have one of my fathers, right? Twice. First, he went over to Africa in the late 70s, and he got on with a tribe. They gave him the name that he currently uses as his last name. recently in the last year or so, he went back over there. They gave him land. They made him, an honor, member of the tribe and all the rest of that stuff. So I mean, like,
Bruh,
from a
that's
physical standpoint, you have land.
that's
You got the
imagination. That's all black man's imagination. Figment of black man's
Now,
imagination.
there's absolutely no way that you can be a part of a culture if you don't understand that culture's nuances.
Right.
And the
But I
first
mean,
way to
there are those
understand
of us that go
nuance,
over there to live. There are those of us that go and take
no,
wives over
no,
there and support
Yeah,
villages over
yeah.
there.
nuance, no, 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 no.
No?
Being able
Nothing.
to understand and communicate and being born with the nuances of a society, being born and fully, completely understanding the difference between the way that you suck your teeth, or the difference between the way that you look at somebody and you move your head this way or that way. All of that, I mean, and not even to describe the fact that the way that you understand their language is through your firstborn language.
That's like
So you can never fully have an understanding.
that's like a white
So,
boy that grew up in the hood.
right.
He could be like, yo, I'm a nigga, I'm a wigger, cause
Okay,
I
so
win.
So based upon what you guys just said, and I why I am leaning on agreeing with you guys, what you are saying then, and you would then have to agree with this statement, is that Africans who come here to America, even if they grew up here, they are not, quote unquote, fitting within the African American experience.
That's why they have the definition. That's why they have the distinction of ADOS, African descendant of slaves, which would be a different than the African who just came here from Nigeria, or your parents in Nigeria, or if your parents in Nigeria in your house.
Right.
And,
so there has to be. I'm sorry.
Go ahead,
I
go ahead.
didn't cut you off.
Go ahead.
But, well, I'm saying that there has to be a long generational disconnect from Africa for a African that originated in Africa to be a part of the American culture. So that memory has to be erased from what's being taught. So we're talking 4 or 5 generations. So great grandma got to die before that African that comes to America is an actual African American with an African American experience, and it still may not be the same.
In the Bronx. I will say that we got some wild ones.
Now, I will say this, because there are young people that come to America as children, and maybe they're African in their house, but in the hood or wherever they grew up in the projects, they're just another black
They some
child.
of the wildest because they didn't got picked on because of their accents. And
Now, to the Africans, a friend of mine fits this category, and among the Africans, they call them, those type of Africans, Akata, which is basically basically saying like, you're not exactly us and you're not exactly them, and typically those kids are wild, like Khalil was saying, because they've been teased and whatever for being different. So they're not operating with the African American disconnect from your historical reality. They all have their last names as being Oli Fonton, whatever the Nigerian. Yeah, they all operate with that still. It's nowhere near compared to a black man. Nowhere near.
Yeah, I mean, tell me what's the difference between that and black people code switching on the job? Like, just because you can navigate certain spaces doesn't mean that you have a full nuanced understanding of white culture just because I can go to a boardroom, give a meeting, and convince people to give me some money or buy my product, or because I can go to the golf course and navigate through these rich, white spaces. I still don't have an understanding of how you live in America as a human being and turn a blind eye to all the suffering and your contribution to it, even if it isn't a direct I'm whooping your ass contribution. It's hard for me. So to me that's like someone trying to explain blind spots to me. Like, nah, you can. I don't believe blind spots. You are consciously doing something daily, whether it's a direct act or whether it's a turning a blind eye. You're consciously doing something to help continue and perpetuate the the oppression. So I don't understand that, living that mentality. What I can do though is I can still walk through white spaces. I can still communicate and deal with white society and deal with white people, and have an understanding and have empathy for, their kids going through situation, to feel happy for them when something good happens to them, and even have an affinity for some of them because they treat me good personally. So that's that's different. That's way different than um than being a part of than having a nuanced understanding of a culture, because understanding big concepts is easy. What's hard is understanding the nuances of a society. And so that's something that we'll never have. So I'll never have a connection with Africa beyond my desire just to be around a bunch of people my skin color. That's
It's funny you say that. I'll ask you your opinion on this because this kind of is a little mini segue to a political little alley oop, if you will. But I'm very interested to hear your opinion on this because it's right in the same vein. There was this debate within the conservative community, if you will, especially amongst the white folks, where they would almost find it comical and outrageous, like as if the woke folks had took their insanity to another level and thinking that black people could be perpetuators of white supremacy, as if, because they did not understand the nuances of like light skin versus dark skin, or good hair versus bad hair, or bougie versus ghetto, or all of these different dynamics that come into play. So my question to you guys then, with that particular thing being said, is do you think that within the context, I think I know the answer already because I know you guys a little bit, is do you think that this conservative concept of, as we try to establish or define what is really African American culture, because see, the reason why logically I'm taking this path of what is African American culture, because if we segue it to Islam, right? Islam says, at least from a hadith or a saying of the Prophet, peace upon him, keep that part of your culture what doesn't conflict with Islam. Well, before I can determine whether or not it conflicts with Islam in that way, I have to first determine what is my culture. So there are some of us like myself that would be inclined to say like things like hip hop, or like how Idris had talked to me in the previous conversations, things like our HBCUs, or you know what I mean, historically black HBCUs, whatever. That that those are represent our culture. But at the same time, can we, in the same way that we need to define what our culture is, are we currently subconsciously perpetuating the dominance of other cultures over our own?
absolutely,
All day.
absolutely, and that's part of our consumerism culture. Because we always want the bigger, better things. So, and it's easy to see even in the way that we do business. I mean, how many people do you know of us? So, and I'm speaking in not in terms that I'm necessarily looking down on people, but since we're talking about our culture, we can't come up here and talk about guys, kings, and queens. We can't Dr. Umar this. We gotta keep it 100. You know what I'm saying? So our culture would, it's not that everything we do is bad, but there's a large percentage of what we do is negative. And I don't want to use the word niggly now because you connect it to negatives, and you're absolutely right. So uh, I'm trying to move away from that because I do understand how some people view words. Even though I can make the disconnect, I don't want other people to make that connection based off of what I'm saying. So, part of what we still connect to is the ignorance, and that ignorance is self-inflicted ignorance as well as taught ignorance. And so we'll do stuff like start a business, and then the first thing we do is go buy a big car instead of reinvest back into the business. Or we'll go buy a house on a 30-year mortgage because they say we can afford the payments, and then we pay three, four, 5 times more than we should have paid if we'd have got a 10-year mortgage and bought less house.
Right.
Bought a
Because what
chain with our advance money.
it exactly so bought a chain with our advance money. That's us, and part of that is because we got our freedom when political scientists, when social scientists were trying to figure out how to make us consumers. That's what they were trying to figure out how to do. How do we keep low wage workers? How do we keep slave workers? What do we do? We have this free market economy. You know what? Let's give women a vote. Let's put them out there in public. Now keep in mind, they make decisions for their grandkids to benefit. We make decisions for us to be able to hit the club Friday.
Now I
So
say
sometimes,
week.
right. So sometimes we don't understand the concepts and how long things take to move and shape. So they started having these conversations. When you go back and read the papers, when you go back and read Congress and the bills and stuff that they were proposing, even ones that didn't pass, once you go back and you truly study the economics of America, then you understand why 50 years later women were able to vote. Then you understand why the big social experiment was bringing women into the workforce when you had a bunch of prisoners that could have did the same thing. So while the men are fighting in World War II, instead of allowing the prisoners to make planes and build this stuff, they put women out there and made these great marketing photos, and now women feel like, oh, I can make decisions, I earn money, I'm empowered. It's all these type of things that are 50, 60, 70-year processes. We don't understand making decisions that way. So what they did was they created a permanent, lower level working class that was even better than slavery, because now guess what they get to do? They get to tax us, and we buying the products that we're making now.
Now
So they pay us. Yeah, go
no,
ahead.
I'm sorry. Finish that point, and then I want to ask you a question.
So I'm saying, so now we're actually indebted to them, and we love them because they make us products that we want to consume.
So with that being said, so I'm real heavy in the marketing, right? And Idris, I don't think I've asked you this question either before, so I definitely want you to chime in after the doc answers this question as well. There's a concept, right, within the whole consumerism model, right, that deals with brand loyalty, right? Now, Idris and I have spoken about what might be perceived as a failed strategy of Imam W.D. Muhammad, right? Where my belief in his strategy of quote unquote integration were that he always emphasized we needed to get qualified. So, if as an example, I want a financial advisor, right? I should go and I should get a Muslim, but he should be qualified. Yeah, I should get a Muslim doctor, but he should have went to medical school. But the problem that I found, and this is where I always have said this, although no person was perfect and no person is beyond or above criticism, I believe that most of the criticism that Imam WD has taken over his time, or how people critique his leadership, that criticism really should be reserved for his followers, because the brand loyalty wasn't there. Folks went to medical school and became doctors, and they went to the hospitals, and they never came back to the communities to open up a medical office. They went and they went and integrated. They went and got a house in the white neighborhoods or in the nice neighborhoods, and they stayed out there. And likewise, pretty much with everything else. So, and it's like, even if you take it outside of the African American Muslim community, the brand loyalty with like a Oprah Winfrey or a Condoleezza Rice or any number of people that we would say have sold us out over the course of days for the sake of their own personal gain. We don't find that lack of brand loyalty, if you will, in the Jews or the Asians or the Indians. So I would ask, what do you think it takes or would take? Because this is actually a question that they ask when I'm like being like a field activator and, managing a market for a particular company or account, they're always wanting to get this particular piece of feedback of like, what would it take for you to become loyal to our brand? Kind of thing. Like, we've tried to give the whole spiel about how good our product is, and we can sit out there all day and talk about Black empowerment and how the oppressors and blah 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 blah. But it's like we're always trying to figure out how does your brain operate? What does it take to click in your head to make you loyal to the brand? To be like, yo, no matter where I go, did you know I'm going back to Israel? I got a house back there. I don't care if I'm in Brooklyn. I don't care if I'm in LA or in Highland Park or wherever in Chicago. I don't care where I'm in Miami. I know that as I move around, there's not going to be any outside influence that's going to cause me to quote unquote betray my family, so to speak. But it seems like that's something that rampantly runs through the African American community.
Right. And that's because we don't think about brand loyalty and being a nigga. We don't think about brand loyalty and being dependent upon racist white people to come off as liberal white people. So there's brand loyalty to that, and liberal, and I don't even want to say liberal whites, but just a different kind of racist white people have put in a lot of time and effort, money, and marketing into branding us to the Democratic Party, branding us to social welfare, branding us to extreme liberalism, branding us to extreme consumerism. Now, both political parties have done that, branded us to extreme consumerism, because within every society, doesn't matter whether it's this society, whether it's a European society, if you can afford something that you see somebody rich wearing, or something that you perceive somebody rich would wear, and you have access to it, then you won't pay your rent to get a Gucci belt. You'll live 5 niggas to a 2-bedroom apartment so that you can drive a Hellcat, because you perceive that somebody rich is driving a Hellcat when the number one sold car of millionaires is an F-150 truck. You know what I'm saying? But we want the Maybach $300,000 when we get $100,000 in our bank account. That's the type of stuff that we do, because where that ultimately, as much as we want to talk about Black culture, consumerism is, if I had to put it on a pie chart, I would say consumerism makes up 40%, 40 to 45% of how we understand and deal with the world. We're talking African descendants of enslaved people.
So what does it take for us to become producers? What do you think that it would take for us to click in our brain and be like, you know what, we've been working on the wrong program and we got a glitch, and it's time to switch to become producers?
Hold on. Let me say, I would like to chime in, because if we have to understand that the Africans were brought here enslaved, so they were free people who were enslaved, and I've been watching this program. This guy, I think his name is Basil Davison. He did a long form documentary on Africa and its development. And what he was saying, like, when he had mentioned that Africans have been the enslavement of Africans had taken place over centuries. And I don't think, for some reason, I hadn't really thought about that. Like, we're accustomed to saying that, we've been enslaved, our ancestors were enslaved for 350 years or 400 years. But I don't think I've ever thought about the idea that there was consistent flow of ships bringing slaves for 300 to 400 year period of going back and forth and back and forth and back and forth consistently for centuries, right? And so the enslaved African is something different than the slave. So I don't know if you recall, like the movie Roots. They had Chicken George, they had Fiddler initially engage with Kunta Kinte, the enslaved African. And he was like, basically telling them all that stuff you thinking about, forget about it. You know what I'm saying? You over here now. You know, your name, forget about it. All that stuff, forget about it. Chicken, the fiddler was a slave. Kunta Kinte was enslaved. There's a difference. So, so for 300 years or plus, our ancestors have been conditioned to not have those connective tissues. Like the name of the movie was Roots, which referred to the stabilizing culture that defines human beings as who they are, their cultural identity. And we don't have roots that keep us in line and say, this is what we're going to do. And I don't care what kind of force, the roots is what keeps the tree from falling down. So when the wind is blowing, the snow is coming, all these different forces come, the roots is what keeps the tree from falling down on your car. And so because we don't have any roots, we go with every new idea, a new concept that's presented. So if the overriding system says we're going to allow these people to be free, not because of some something in their hearts like, oh, we recognize their humanity, they made that decision for capitalist reasons. For the same reason they brought them here, for the free labor. Now it's time to move them into another place where we're going to tax them, where we're going to imprison them, and use, there's an economic reason why the dominant culture here does things in the open society, and we don't have a defense for it. We don't have a culture that says, oh, I'm not going for that one. I'm not going for that okie doke. What is best for us? So you was asking about how do we come together as consume and become producers. That would take a completely different mindset. Like, that's what I'm saying. Like, we don't even understand the condition that we're operating under. So you're going to have conservatives. You're going to have Democrats. You're going to have people claiming all different types of identities. There's some people that's capitalist. Some people are socialists. As an African American, we do not have a true culture. And I would define a culture as a set of behaviors that have been adapted over a period of time that ensure the survival and the thriving of a particular group.
And that wait. And that's where now since we got it on camera, now that's what we gotta circle back around again and give homage, if you will, to the original Nation of Islam,
right?
That essentially became the first/second resurrection within the Muslim community. I'm not talking about the post 1977 folks, you know what I'm saying, with Abdul Halim switching back to Farrakhan. I'm talking about the original OGs, the pioneers of the current African American Muslim community. It was like, we can debate in certain ways, and we can definitely use this platform, you know what I'm saying, to kind of put that out there, because, we don't hold no punches. Imam WD was not above critique or criticism, Now, as my instructor, and Father Ben Bilal said, you got to be qualified to critique Imam W.D. Muhammad. You got to kind of know, the whole background of things. But one thing for sure is that, I would have personally, if I had been in this position, kept more of the culture of the Nation of Islam that had been organically established here in America, which, as he had expressed, was designed with the intent of ensuring the survival and continued success of our particular, subspecies or sub-ethnic group. So, we kept the bean pie, if you will, but, all of that real eat to live, you realize how many overweight folks is in Imam WD's community that you would have never seen in the Nation of Islam.
I mean, I would question the statement that we kept the bean pie, because again, without any institutions, you need institutions. That's what libraries are for. That's what schools are for. That's what you have to create institutions, museums, to become a catalyst for what you deem to be significant. So there is no ownership of bean pie. I looked online and Martha Stewart has a bean pie recipe. You know what I'm saying?
No.
Yeah. So what I'm saying
But
is,
you have to have a. I'm
go
sorry.
ahead, sure.
No, I was saying, but you have to have a desire to want to create institutions, and we don't have a desire. We
Right.
have lip service. We have zero desire to put forth the effort to create institutions.
Why do you think that is? Do you think that we have been systematically beat down? Do you
No.
like what is
No.
it? Is it an opposing force? Like what is
No.
it that's causing that? Because no other ethnic group has this
They,
disability, if you will.
No. They do have the same. Everyone in the West has the same consumer vibe at the same level. The difference is they have ready-built institutions that they come into, or they make the additional income that it doesn't take away from their ability to be a consumer. We make choices. We choose consumerism most of the time over building. And so that right there, so the reason why that question is so hard to answer is because you're talking to somebody that instead of spending money to get a Maybach truck, which I could afford, me and my business partner spent $800,000 on a piece of equipment so our business would run better. And because I'm in cannabis, we don't get financing. We can't put up 10% and get somebody to trust us. We got to pay cash for it. So that cash is gone. Feel what I'm saying? So that's what you have to do to build.
Right.
And so we as a people, we love consuming more than we love building. So making that connection, or when you ask what does it take, it takes telling people they ain't shit. That's what it takes. Nigga, you ain't shit because we ain't built nothing in our community in 40, 50 years.
But I think that
so you can get mad at me. Listen,
he's on to something. We're gonna talk. He's on to something.
You can get mad at me for saying it, but I'm not saying it for the niggas my age and y'all old niggas. We old and we fucked up and we made bad decisions. I'm saying it so the young people hear somebody that looks older than them with some gray in their head that's not scared to call people out and be like, this ain't the way. That's not the way. And I'm hoping 3, 4, 5 generations later that more people like me say that and it clicks. And so we still are consumers because that's how our economy, that's how America works. That's how the West works. But we're builders first, like everyone else. Everyone else is a builder first and a consumer second. The difference between them and us is we're consumers first. So we make trillions of dollars. Go ahead. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
So one of the defining characteristics of the slave is the lack of knowledge of self that was stripped of you. So if you take a baby, a slave, an enslaved African that was from Ivory Coast, had their culture, knew their traditions, have a baby. You take that baby and you send them somewhere. They don't talk to these people anymore. And that baby now grows up without any of that information. But because it's a human being, it's going to take certain information up just, in the human process. And so if you teach that baby that it's a worker, that it's a slave, that it's whatever, that's what it's going to know. And so our culture at this point is the culture of that baby as opposed to the culture of the enslaved African parent. So that baby that was taught that it was a slave and the condition that it is in is its natural born condition, for 400 years, that baby had babies, teaching a set of behaviors and thoughts. That baby never had to, and as it grew to an adult and grew to an elder and died, it never had to think about building things for its own interest. It never had the idea that you had to build institutions because all of the labor and the thoughts of a slave is one surviving. How do I not get myself murdered? And the work that you were assigned to do was just labor work. It wasn't mental work. So if this slave master needed a library to hold for his institution and or a museum for himself, all he told you was to build the edifice of a library. You don't have any idea what a library is for. You don't where the library is, what color is painted, what materials. None of that is your business. All your business is at the end of the day, there's going to be a building there. And so that's how we understand reality. We understand reality from what I call middle management level. We don't have the knowledge of starting from the real bottom, from the planning era. So somebody's going to solve this problem. So like in the projects where a pipe bust, you complain to housing for years, and you be like, "Oh, it's black mold. Oh, my kids ain't taking a shower in 6 days." Whatever. Nobody's going to be like, "Yo, I'm going to become a plumber and fix that pipe because I need my sink to be working." You'll bitch about housing for 6 months. You'll bitch about housing for 3 years before you figure out, I need to go get a wrench and fix this goddamn pipe. So building institutions takes a certain type of thinking, and the child, the descendant of that enslaved baby, is never going to think that deeply. The library that exists, the New York library, that's my library. That's that slave's library. That airport, that's out. So that's where the issue that when I said about Imam WD, for instance, my critique was that his message was to go get qualified, and what that meant to people like us is to go into these institutions and become a doctor, become a physician, become a lawyer, but now I'm making 6 figures. I'm making, I have a pension. I have good credit. You want me to leave that institution to go build another one on my own with, what does that mean? What does that look like? I'm leaving this lofty law firm that name rings bells and it's prestige. I can pop my collar and say, yeah, I made it here. I'm Muslim. I have my kimal on. I wear my kufi. I get off of Ramadan. I take off. That's perfection. I've achieved the American dream. So you telling me that that's not enough? I have to go and leave that to go establish my own law firm? My own hospital? Are you kidding me? You know how hard it is to build a hospital? You want me to leave that? That's impossible. So
no, good.
No, I'm saying that's basically what's being but so I'd rather be in a hospital, and then they'll say, well, 4 out of a high percentage, I don't know the exact percentage, but there's a high percentage African American women die during childbirth disproportionately.
Yeah.
So you could say, you know what, I'm going to solve that by creating my own clinic, creating my own, I would have to observe what's going wrong. Well, I see what's happening. So I'm going to raise hell in my hospital and be like, we need to stop doing that. Or we need to fix this. Rather than go and create a clinic that handles the whole process correctly. What's the correct step? And but I think that you get the 6-figure job, you're not endangering that. What if you thinking that
everybody does that? That's the problem, is that everybody stayed. We just needed one person to come back. Everybody.
Yeah, you gonna come back? You gonna give up your job? You gonna be the one that come back?
Yeah, but I mean, why are you creating that straw man? Why are you creating that extreme straw man argument?
Which one?
You.
No, I'm saying, what's the argument? What's the straw man argument?
Yeah. So it's why is the position that you have to give up your job? and not just sacrifice and give money and time. So if you want to go from a historical standpoint, my 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 question has always been: once you remove the boule from the talented tenth, what's wrong with that philosophy? See, our power problem, part of another issue that we have is that we think we need a big crowd and a bunch of pats on the back from people in order to make movement, in order to make things happen. Whereas if, and I say this all the time, I tell you all the time, I'm just trying to find my 10%. I don't believe in the boule aspect of the talented 10. I do believe in the talented 10 philosophy though. If you remove the arrogance, if you remove the boule, and it's not from a standpoint
Now,
that
for the people who don't know, can you for the audience, can you please explain what the talented
And I also wanted to redress the straw man argument point. But go ahead.
yeah, okay, no. Redress it first.
Okay, because what I'm saying is that obviously this is what it's not a straw man argument because that's actually what happened. We have tons.
Position, right? If you're saying that, why should I quit my job? That's the straw man right there. That's the ad hominem.
No,
that's why is it that if you want to give back that you have to quit your job? Why isn't it that you just give back and put in time?
I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why.
Yeah.
Because we all know that these jobs are very demanding. You know, when you're paying when a white boy paying you 6 figures, he getting 7 figures work out of your ass. So by the time you finish doing your shifts or putting in your time or pressing those buttons and levering those gears, it's besides physically and mentally draining. You don't have time because you and I both know. You know, we all know what it is to create a business. It would be impossible for you to. Go ahead, sorry. Go ahead.
No, have you seen the new medical centers that they're building that only do private care? They don't take insurance. It's the head doctor, the doctor that starts that is the doctor that's doing all the surgeries. He's not there half the time. Half the time he becomes a manager and probably just does surgery enough that he knows how to do it and he can manage the other doctors. So my point is he builds a network of doctors that work there and they may moonlight at a hospital. Or I don't know too many doctors before they built their practice up that didn't moonlight in emergency rooms or didn't moonlight, have a office that they set up that they may work out of 2 days a week because they had built their clientele up and then they work out of another office.
Still takes locums work.
So my point is to me, you set up the straw man or the ad hominem, but you set up the logical fallacy by making it that either the only way that you can build it is if you give up the 6-figure income. And that's not true. You can do both. You might be tired. You might spend a lot of time. You may put in 2-3 years that you're working 80 hours a week.
Yeah.
But it can be done.
Yeah, I didn't mean to say, and thanks for pointing that out. I'm not saying that it's impossible, but what I'm saying it's improbable. Right? Okay. Because it's going to require that what you just said, and without having, so that's without having purpose. Like you really, really have to be dedicated to this idea, and that's what it can be done, and there's people that do it. But
so what does this lead back to though? This leads back to the fact, like I originally said, our desire to be consumers is greater than our desire to build. Because during Reconstruction we did it. During slavery we did it, didn't get paid for it. See what I'm saying? Right. So we've allowed our desire to be consumers, we've allowed that to be greater than our desire to be builders because we will go work all weekend, go party all weekend, and be dead tired to go back to work so we can party all the next weekend. But you're telling me that you can't put in 70 hours a week, building this clinic and maintaining your job, and your wife, or if you're a wife, your husband doesn't have understanding. And why is it that everyone that has to be hired immediately has to be Muslim? Because there's not enough qualified Muslims that can put that much time in there. But if it's Muslim leadership, if it's Muslim ran, if there's a Muslim code of conduct, what difference does it make? Are they a qualified medical person, and are they following this agenda? And so this is what I mean by it we as a people come up with excuses, not because we don't want to do it, but we don't want to take away from our ability to be consumers in
Now,
order
now,
to do it.
here's where I'm gonna loop a couple of things. I stayed silent for a minute, so to speak, because I wanted to hear these answers, but I also was kind of taking in some information to kind of group a couple of different concepts back together. There's this concept in genetics, right, about the activation of traits. One of the things I believe that Imam W.D. Muhammad believed, I believe something similar, is that within the African American that is experiencing this current matrix of things, there exists within us the potential ability. So I can say that from my own personal experience from going overseas and going to go visit certain places where Egyptians and things like that took me to and said, these are your people, and me seeing people that look just like me and things of that nature. That superseding, if I'm going to say my genetic code is almost like a timeline, I'm not going to deny that the slave experience is there and was a very traumatic part of the sequence, but it was not the only part. And that certainly before that, mixed in with that, there's a Moorish explorer. Yes, there's at the very least, somebody that was in the royal court. You know what I'm saying? Like I want, you know what I mean? Whether it was just as a scientist, mathematician, astrologer, like I wasn't just no, bricklayer type of person. You know what I mean? And that within the, I used to have a friend of mine. God bless his soul. My boy Chikosi passed away. He was like a devout Christian, and he and I used to go back and forth a lot about theology. And he used to tell me that within the Book of Revelations, there was this storyline, if you will. I forgot what the exact book was, Book Timothy, whatever. But it was basically speaking of a time when there would be people who were soldiers of God, if you will, like when the army of light would battle and clash against the army of darkness. He said there were people who were soldiers of God, but they didn't know it yet. And that there would come an activation that would basically put them within the ranks. And we know from genetics, you can take two twins and put them in two totally separate environments, depending on the environmental conditions and the lifestyle, it'll determine which traits get activated. So that's why when I ask that question, it's like I believe that the Imam, and likewise myself, that even though, yes, everything that you guys have said is accurate about what our current condition is, that within us exists the potential energy within our genetic code to be activated, superseding past the slave point, to all of a sudden we are those movers and shakers. And that's where I guess me and my troubleshooting mind is trying to say, okay, well, what is or could be the environmental conditions to activate that part of our code? Because I believe that we were free within our code a whole lot longer than we were enslaved. And I acknowledge that it was a dramatic period, but like, who were we before that and now after that? And we can, with our conscience, because of how powerful the brain is and how powerful that book is that Allah put in that genetic code, we can activate parts of our code that go way past the slave part and bring that into existence, and even, have it permeate among society to where all of a sudden we're not just dealing with nigger shit no more. All of a sudden you got Imhotep scientists and shit like that. You ain't even got to say Imhotep. Imhotep wasn't the king, right? He was just the master builder, right?
Yeah, but I think part of we talk in real time, but society moves centennially, and society moves millennially. And so we if you look at the Sahaba, how much time was between the time that Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam received revelation and Islam was established? We won't even talk about Mecca. We'll just talk about in Medina. We'll say that's pretty much when Islam was established. How much time was between that period and Umar being assassinated? See what I'm saying? Like, bad shit happened, and it happened amongst people that had the revelation and saw the Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam in real life, in real time. So part of our issue is we don't think the way that other parts of society think because of the consumer in us. Because that's what we know as Americans. That's what we know as coming out of slavery and getting your freedom. And then we've always had this quest to obtain things and to have things.
We have had Black Wall Streets and Harlems and stuff like that too, right?
We have had them. But the thing that I'm saying is part of moving forward is moving forward politically with the right ideology, not with the level of inclusion. When Reconstruction happened, there was more black people in office. There were more black people, or there were more positive black codes being made than any other time in American history. What happened? And so these are the things that I'm saying is people know how to tap into our desire to be consumers. And so tapping into that is what leaves us in the position that we're in. And the other thing is that we're trying to bring everyone along. You can't bring everyone along. What you can do is, if you can connect with your 10%, connect with them. And 10% can change the world or build something. If you can't connect with your 10%, then you leave a lexicon, especially now with the age of social media, of writings, of Facebook posts, of Bean Pie Chronicle, YouTube pages, that people can come back later and tap into the ideas and the energy that we're putting out there now. Because we're consumers, we literally think shit can change now. We literally think shit can change for me. And when I say that, maybe it may change for me, but that doesn't do anything for the mass of our people. The ones that we're trying to do.
But I look at like let's bring that into like current event type thing. Like you see what just happened with the Bud Light type situation, right? That's
right.
Real time, right?
That's pop culture. There's nothing changing. People still drinking beer. People, and that'll die down. And maybe Bud Light will never come back from making that faux pas, but the red can still is. You know what I'm saying?
Modelo still sell. Right.
Modelo still sells. So that's part of what I'm saying is we try to affect pop culture because that's that microwave society. That's that instant consumer, and that's that instant gratification. Society moves centennially at best. It moves centennially.
So you saying you need a 50-year plan, 100-year plan.
That's the only way that you get out of this condition. And part of getting out of this condition, part of what, if we read history as if it's one thing, as if it's on a wall. We don't read history linearly. You know what I'm saying? So if you read history, I forget what they call the little charts where they have the dates on them and this
timeline.
Timeline, yeah. If we thought about that like it's going away from us, then we'd have an understanding of how society moves and changes. We don't have an understanding because we're just looking at a book on pages and we see it flat. We don't see it in a timeline that's moving far away from us. We truly don't have a concept and an idea of how long it takes society to make a change in order to go in this direction or that direction, whether it's bad or good or whatever.
Like he's talking about, he mentioned the Bud Light, but that transgender person that they tried to make the spokesperson for this time, that person's personality has been under development since the 60s, since the sexual revolution, since the you know,
Listen,
liberation, and all
But
that stuff.
the cancellation happened instantly.
No,
And
but the cancellation only happened because it's going against some older tradition.
It's pop culture though.
It's pop culture, but it's going against right.
But if people really felt as strongly as they did about that Bud Light commercial, again, this is where we're fighting consumerism. We're not fighting white folks. White folks are using consumerism in order to get money out of us and keep us slaves. We're fighting consumerism. And once we realize that as black people, then we make better decisions, because it's easier to be a builder than it is to be a consumer once you realize that's your real fight. Because the bottom line is the first papers that started being written to make this whole new thing good was way back in the day with Sigmund Freud and them. And it took them 70, 80, 90 years to get to the point that they made having them type of feelings and having sex change and stuff. They decided that wasn't a mental disorder. That happened in 73. Sigmund Freud is 10s and 20s. So again, because we're instant microwave society, that's supposed to happen today, we don't understand how other people, how people move societies. There was a group of people that got together and decided, you know what, this is where we think the direction of America should be. We feel like people should be able to choose their gender, that it's fluid and all that. That started in the 20s and 30s. They started pushing that in the 20s and 30s, writing papers, putting papers out there, going to debates, going to conferences, having these breakoff meetings, these breakoff sessions in college campus and stuff. One person get in charge, then they started these liberal arts schools, and so now we're only going to bring liberals here. We're not going to have any conservatives. That way we can push this agenda, and then we're going to make this woman driven, because women need to be educated, and then we're going to start women's studies class. Like, all of that was an agenda that started back in the 1880s, 1890s.
So
how do we get?
So here's my final question for the night. So I realize where we are time wise, but I gotta get this question out. Based upon what you guys just said, is it reasonable to assume that, being that these major changes that you guys spoke of take centuries, or at the very least decades, it's a multi-generational process, that we are currently experiencing or witnessing the halfway point of that process? Now you see where I'm going with that? Like, I gotta ask that question.
Because, and I tell you what, because we only want to look at this idea from a positive output, not from reality. And reality is that we were coming out of slavery into Reconstruction, and we were doing a whole bunch of positive things, and that the generational aspect of it turned us into what we are now. You see what I'm saying? Now, we would understand it and appreciate it if it turned us all into Malcolm X. If it turned us all into Brother Malik El-Haj Shabazz, then we'd be looking at it like, oh, this is a great thing. We're not looking at it like it was done. And so now,
you know, but so that's a point that a lot of conservatives, black conservatives in particular, Thomas Sowell types, they make those types of observations. Now, my pushback to that would be that coming out of slavery, first of all, obviously the enslaved, the slaves were in control of the labor. They the ones that basically been doing the work for hundreds of years. So now you have to pay them to do what you used to get for free, and they're actually, maybe the information on how to do these things were basically locked into their they had the skills and the knowledge and the know-how, right? But at the end of the day, what they were doing was still, I would say, mimicking what was expected of an American, what they saw Master doing. That became their objective. So the white people, Master had Masonic lodges, they had churches, they had They ran for Congress. So being free to them meant to do what they saw happening around them, and they were competent
Right.
enough to do that. But that
But we
still is
did.
not. But that's still not. See, what happened in the '60s is, and even before then, is that as black people started to like leave the country and military and through like musicianship, traveling the world, they began to see different ways, different possibilities of even existing. Like that, why do I have to be locked into this European WASP, Eurocentric way of operating myself?
But that's the problem. It's not European. It's
What's
distinctly American.
but
And so
American, but American is, but American is the like the language. It's not. I wouldn't even say it's a hybrid. It's the founding fathers and the people
Okay,
who are
look.
the cookie cutter of a standard American is a white Anglo-Saxon Protestant.
But this is part of what the issue is. This is part of what and this is where language and trust in your brothers become important. Because it's certain words and concepts that and it, this is why I stay away from these conversations, because I just don't have the time sometimes to argue back and forth. Not that you don't have the intellectual ability, that's not what I'm saying, but I'm saying in general. And the reason why I'm having this conversation now is because it's with you brothers. If it was some other people, I'd just skip it. The point that I'm trying to make is this right here. We all agree that we're not African and we don't have the nuance to understand what's going on in Africa, even though we may have an affinity, a love, an affection, a desire, all that kind of stuff. The only thing that we have in common is our skin color. That's it. And then when you talk about Africa, we think about that again on a flat book. We're not thinking about that like within Nigeria, there's 20, 30, 40 different languages and 20, 30, 40 different groups of people.
Right.
And that goes throughout all the countries within Africa. So there is this ideal of us connecting with Africa is just absolutely ridiculous beyond our desire, our personal consumeristic desire to consume that aspect. But what we are and what we do have a better understanding of is American culture. And part of American culture is being a capitalist. And that's the aspect of American culture that we have not come to terms with is
did we not contribute?
Part
Did we not contribute to that capitalism? No, like it's not Madam C.J. Walker didn't take part of free capitalism.
I'm not. The point that I'm trying to make is we don't take advantage of capitalism in the way that a capitalist should. We take advantage of capitalism from a consumer standpoint. Consumerism is our issue. Consumerism is why we overeat. Consumerism is why we spend money on X instead of Z. Consumerism is why we make bad decisions with our kids and we won't take care of our kids.
But let me say, the slaves, our culture is a derivative of this culture that the slaves developed over a 300-400 year process, and so they weren't capitalists. They were capital.
No, listen. Which is why when you combine nigga, slave, whatever you want to call it, with consumerism, you get a niggardly consumer.
Okay.
And so that was developed when you talk about the slave mind, that was developed over centuries.
Correct.
And then when you talk about the consumer mind, that's been developed
in the past century.
And so if you're fighting that,
but you're not fighting it. You're not fighting it.
But I'm talking about on a large level. We've named 2, maybe 3 people that have really tried to fight that battle, but they had parts of plans. And then we have so much infighting. So you take Booker T. Washington, and then you take the Nation of Islam. Those are the only 2 groups of people that truly made headway with their philosophical idea of breaking the idea of consumerism and dependency. Outside of them 2, who else do we have that made a legitimate run for it? Elijah Muhammad and Booker T.
But
Washington.
Booker T. Washington's approach was not um in he wasn't trying to he wasn't trying he Booker T. Washington is more like Imam WD in the sense that he was trying to show that the African American was could become a productive part of the American establishment.
That's your looking back surface level observation of what's happening. His idea could have been something totally different. The way I look back at it is here's a slave that brought himself up, started a university, and realized, like, hey, ain't nobody taking care of our black ass no more. We got to eat. Now, I'm only going to live so long, and these people got to be able to survive for the next 20, 30, 40, 50 years. And then somebody else down the road is going to take and expound upon this and make it better. The problem is the people down the road, our leaders, got in bed with white liberals and turned
That's
us
that
into
brand loyalty. It goes back to that brand loyalty.
the brand
But
loyalty.
Booker T.
Exactly.
Washington was also financed and supported by I wouldn't necessarily call them white liberals, but he was beholden to white people. He wasn't no
And Booker T. Washington financed Marcus Garvey and Frederick Douglass. So my point is we want to look at it from the aspect again of instant gratification. So in Islam, we had this concept that if you ain't got nothing to eat but pork, and that's truly all you got to eat it. Alhamdulillah, eat it, tear it up. When you get down the road, maybe you may have a different option.
right.
So, but we don't look at it from the aspect of we're trying to change pork into horse meat, and then horse meat into cow, and then cow into organic, non-GMO, whatever. Wagyu. That's. I'm telling you, society moves centennially, and so it took. Listen, and this is what I need you to understand, Idris. It took literally 100 years, 120 years to go from Reconstruction to wet ass pussy. They've been working on us since they made us free and realized we're more talented, we have more ingenuity, we can do capitalism better. How do we break that? How do we fix this? Because we can't just dealing in the world society and how the rest of the society is moving now. We can't keep them slaves. We can't just kill them all. How do we do this? So they came up with 4 or 5 different plans. We're going to imprison them. We're going to give them jobs up north so they stop working for themselves and they disconnect themselves from the community and they disconnect
them off their land too.
We're going to confiscate their land. And then the other thing that we're going to do is we're going to turn them into total consumers.
See, so the question is, when you're talking about they, right? When you're talking about they, you're talking about the American establishment.
I'm talking about the capitalists
that run America. So that's why it's such a challenge for black people to claim America as a unique identity, because part of that identity is white supremacy. Part of that identity is the ever-present, the omnipresent force, unseen force that has it out for you to be enslaved, indebted. I'm saying you just acknowledge.
No, but listen what I'm saying. Who killed who? The Houthis, the Tutus, or the
Houthi or Tutsi?
Yeah,
they both.
Who killed who?
I couldn't tell the difference.
Well, I'm saying that's the same experience. They killed 8 million of them in 5-6 years. That's the same. So
no, that's not the same experience, because at the end of the day, you could get.
No, the thing that I'm saying is they were 2 different people living in the same society, and they killed each other, or one side really killed the other side for years. But the point is that don't make them less Rwandan.
Yeah, that does no, that's definitely not the same thing because they're both Rwandans at the core. One group did not dominate and control the other. They both, at the end of the day, knew who they were. They like to kill somebody is nicer actually than to enslave somebody and to take their knowledge of self and turn them into slaves for 400 years. Whichever one of the groups that died, they didn't have centuries to create a whole new culture or reality of being food or being killed lambs to the slaughter. That didn't develop into a whole way of being for this group of people. They were killed over a short period of time, and that was it. We have a whole mentality. We have a whole mentality, cultural behavior that is pockmarked with realities that only come from being enslaved.
No, that's the point. Wait, let me just make this point right quick. Yeah. When we speak of same thing again, going back to genetic memory, keep in mind.
That epigenetic stuff is nonsense, bro.
No, it's not.
Yes, it is. That's nonsense.
On that says that there's a master book that leaves out nothing, and ironically, those words for the good book and the bad book, they end in the word gene. Gene. Yes. So, with that being said,
knock it off.
I'm telling you that there is an ability for a person. They always talk about genes skip generations and all the rest of this other stuff. The same person, for every person out there that may say about the slave experience and the oppression and this land ain't for me, there's another one out there that can claim like, nigga, I built this shit. And nigga, I got X amount of family members that fought in X amount of wars. Or, yo, I was...
They lying to themselves.
Huh?
They lying to themselves. If you fought in a war, just like the enslaved slaves that was fought, yeah, a slave's blood is in the floor. You didn't fight for something that was inherently yours. If America had a fight with France, or that's why Muhammad Ali said, I'm not going to Vietnam, because no Vietnamese ever called me a nigga. He realized he's making a statement that whatever beef that is, that's not my beef. So if you got on a plane and went and killed somebody on behalf of a beef that ain't yours, but then you came home like the World War II veteran, and your black ass still can't get on the bus, or the people in your uniform decide to hang you because you think you're an uppity nigga, that people got tired of that. You can't come and tell me that this is mine when built into its very DNA is a system of oppression. It was built on you being a slave for 400 years.
Yes, but when you have it be that every bit of your fight for freedom not only benefited you, but every other member of the underclass, then you wind up being an integral part of what you see that flag that you got behind you. You see that fabric, whatever fabric it's made out of. It can be polyester, cotton, or whatever. The deeds of the African American within this U.S. experience has made it to where we are so interwoven, if you will, into that fabric that there's no way that they can claim that there is an America without the contributions of African Americans.
Listen. If you want to say, like my neighbor, when I first moved out here, I lived across the street from this 90-year-old man, and he was telling me about how he was a sharecropper, and you know how he had a mule, and you had this mule, and how the mule pulled the plow, and they were basically partners in tilling his field. So that mule sweat just as much as he did, right? But that mule's role in the production was basically limited to what that man wanted him to do. That mule didn't say whether it was cabbage, whether it was corn, whether it was spaghetti. He don't have anything to do but to pull his plow. But his blood is sweat in the ground. You were mules. We were mules. You were mules. But you didn't have nothing to do. You didn't have nothing to. They didn't ask you what we planting today and where we selling it, how much it costs.
Yeah, and we never fought back. We never was like, nah, I'm not done with
So
you.
my
Nigga,
question is
you fought back for 400 years? How can
So
something
I'm
exist
saying
for
though,
400 years if you fought back so
Idris,
gallantly and won? You
Idris,
lost. Yep.
Idris.
We fought a Gullah war for
At
200
some point, at some point, at
Yeah.
some point, that mule was taken off the shackle, right?
Yep.
And if you put a carrot on one side, and then you put a whatever the strap that they pulled the plow strap on another side, and you call the mule, where do you think the mule is gonna go?
The mule gonna go to the carrot because I think he eats carrots.
Oh, okay, right. But what if when the mule goes to the carrots, all he gets is one carrot, but if he goes to the plow, he gets 20 carrots. Then where's the mule gonna go?
He's gonna go to the 20 carrots.
That's what's happening to black people. That's black people. In your example, that's black people. We got 20 carrots, but we still plowing America. How? Consumerism. We give every fucking thing right back.
Right.
All $1.9 trillion that we get it back, and we do it gladly. Why? Because we've been told that the 20 carrots over here that's under the plow, that when we go down to eat the carrots, they put the plow on our neck and we look right back up. So my thing is that the mule is smart enough to know to eat the carrots. It's just how you present them carrots. And so this is consumerism. But in order to be animated, we have a nuanced understanding of consumerism, and we choose for consumerism to consume us instead of using consumerism as a tool to build. White people, Asians, Jews, Mexicans, everybody else use their consumerism in order to build themselves and their communities. We use consumerism like that mule.
But my question is why do we keep playing as a mule? See, the other people are not mules. The other people are not mules. The other people are the guys who control the mules. We have either that one thing or the other. We need to stop being mules.
Because, and this is my point, it goes back to, first of all, they were never enslaved.
Right.
Or they were enslaved in recent history. And, and it goes right back to what the original question was: how do we break this cycle? What do? We stop looking for the masses and we connect with our 10%. Spend your life trying to find your 10%, your talented 10th. And don't be arrogant about your talented 10th. The talented 10th has nothing to do with how much money is in your pocket today. It has to do with the ideas in your head and what you're willing to sacrifice in order for your people to gain some measure of respectability in this society. Like I said, I'm looking for my 10%. I'm in search. Every day I wake up, I'm looking for my 10%. That's it. I'm not worried about, which is why I speak the way that I speak, because I don't give a fuck about half these niggas anyway. Because they dead, they mentally dead, and they fucked up, and we in the position that we in because we followed them, because we followed these leaders, because they had better.
Because they told us out. They took the gift.
They had the gift of gab.
Listen, I'm gonna bring it back to Islam, because ultimately that's what Bean Pie Chronicles is about. They had better tajweed than us, but they had worse character because they had no vision. And if you're a leader with no vision, if you're a leader with no vision, you have no business being a leader. But they become drunk on being a leader. Otherwise, you would step your ass down. There's no way that these people that we lionize, there's no way that we can lionize them when they're not willing to step aside. You know what I'm saying? It shouldn't be a black masjid in the United States that got somebody giving a football or an email that the majority of the footballs are given by old niggas. And if you're a community and you ain't got nobody young in there giving these footballs, they got a better understanding, they can lead us in a direction that's more in touch with reality, then you're the problem. But we're too scared to say that because we want to put respect on people's name while we're living a terrible life. And then they're leading us down this road with dead communities full of apostates and people that don't practice. We still don't have good communities. We don't have nothing built. We don't have jobs to offer people. Like we have nothing, but we still live this is like we help white people. We help the society at large. We help them keep us on that fucking plow eating 20 carrots. We help them do it because we won't call people out. We won't hold our parents. We won't hold our leadership. We won't hold them accountable. We let them get up on the minbar every fucking Friday and berate the fuck out of us. Tell us we ain't doing this. We ain't doing that. Y'all need to do this. Y'all need to do that. And then we let them get away with it. Why? Because they say, I speak to myself first. Nigga, you the fucking leader.
Here's one thing that I will say to kind of wrap everything up here from what Doc was saying. In the same way I was saying about African Americans being so ingrained into the fabric of America, if you look at everything that Riyadh has said about African Americans, specifically regarding consumerism, as we approach a debt ceiling, if you will, within our U.S. government, we see that this massive spending / consumerism mentality, which is why debt is skyrocketing not only amongst the country, but also credit card debt. We are the microcosm of this country. Like you say that we like, you know, we fall victim to pop culture, but I counter that and say we are pop culture.
Exactly. No, you don't have to counter. We are. Exactly. We are that.
But you say that, but Khalil is saying it like it's a badge of honor. You're saying it's like pop culture is like throwaway culture. It ain't. It's not.
I'm saying that whatever is created from the human experience, that people say, "Yo, I want to keep that," like barbecuing and fried chicken and whatever.
Oh, shit.
You know
Hell
what I mean?
no. Keep that bullshit.
Nah, like
see,
whatever
nah, Khalil.
he said barbecue and fried chicken.
The stuff that black people want to keep is self-driving cars. With no nigga involved in that.
Right.
What people want to keep is telephones.
Right.
With a black telephone company.
Right.
What people want to keep is sliced bread.
Cell phone, no, that's the point.
Come on, bro. You ain't create no damn cell phone.
If we did create,
you watch too much internet nonsense, bro.
If we did create it, we sold it. We sold it out the minute that we created it. But my whole point is this right here. It goes back to us desiring to be consumers. So we like the way that
my point was that everything you said does not apply just to African Americans, but to America as a whole. That was the point I was trying to make. Like the consumerism, everything that you just said, does it not apply?
But they have more.
America at this point?
They have more, and they build. You have to understand they provide a service. Mexicans don't have a whole bunch of products and services out there. They have products and services that they sell amongst themselves. What do Mexicans provide to the United States? Labor, landscaping. They provide services to America, and they go right back to their community. And the next thing you know, part of the black community is turned into Little Mexico. I ain't mad at them. They looked at the system. They understand, oh, this is capitalism. I'm a consumer. How do I change this so that I make other people consumers? Now it's a Mexican restaurant on every goddamn corner.
And I buy my tacos. I ain't even gonna hold you.
Bruh, I'm telling you, bruh. That's all I'm saying. Thai people, Vietnamese people. It's a Vietnamese restaurant on every corner now. I remember when it was hard to find a Vietnamese restaurant. It's a Vietnamese restaurant on every corner. They know how to be a consumer, but not let consumerism lead their life. We don't know how to not let consumerism lead our life, which is why we still got old ass. I'm going to keep harping on this because I want this to be a part of my lexicon. We got old ass imams regurgitating the same feel-good, fiery preacher speeches and not leading because we like to consume niggerology. we like to feel good instead of being like, oh, wait a minute, what's the second thing that the Muslims did when they established their own community? Oh, they set up trade so that they could so that they could buy stuff, so that they could afford stuff, so that they could. Then the next thing they did was they set up jizya. Oh, if you want our protection, you got to give us money too. So the first two of the first three things they did when they went from Mecca to Medina was figure out how to get money.
And I always say this: people get so caught up in Muhammad, the Prophet, peace be upon him, and fail to realize that the moral fabric that made him qualified to become a prophet, peace be upon him, was the fact that he was the most ethical of businessmen. So you get so many people who get so caught up in the theology of things. And like I said, you got so many imams out there that either don't know business.
I mean, I wouldn't say that I wouldn't say that that's what qualified him, because
you mean Elamine? He was the trustworthy.
Yeah, that's not what qualified him for receiving revelation. I'm sure he wasn't the only trustworthy person. He's related to Prophet Ishmael, and that's his core. He's related to the prophecy, the promise that Allah gave Ibrahim, that he would make from his lineage messengers and prophets.
Okay. From a genetic standpoint, yeah.
No, not from a genetic standpoint, from a spiritual standpoint, which is the essence. Yeah.
There's certain things that you got to do as a businessman, like keep your word, like, keep, like how Allah mentions in the Quran, have your scales be just. Like there's certain moral principles that come with being a good businessman that people who are not in business either don't grasp those concepts or don't have regular training in sharpening that particular skill. That's all I'm saying.
I mean,
so here's the thing that black people don't understand. If you go to Chechnya, Afghanistan, and you go to that part of the world, those are very tough people. Like, they're very, you don't fuck with them.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? They'll kill you quick.
Mm-hmm.
And they practice Islam. Why is that? Because they've been fighting wars in that part of the world since Kublai Khan. You see what I'm saying? Like, there's never been a long period of peace. They've always been, that part of the world, for whatever reason, they've been fighting. So their Islam reflects that. Is that Islam of a certain area reflects it. So the Islam in Asia is different than the Islam in Africa. The Islam in South Africa is different than the way they practice it in Nigeria, because it's colloquially it's
correct.
Islam in forms. So the point that I'm trying to make, I'm saying all that to say that we haven't done that here in America.
You're right.
We haven't let Islam inform our culture, because as you see, we're having a conversation today about what is American culture. And so you can't take away the bad stuff and be like, oh no, that's only that stuff that shouldn't be a part of our culture and who we are. Yes, it is.
Right.
Yes, it is. And so capitalism, consumerism, slavery, Jim Crow, niggerism, and all the other stuff, this is our culture. No different than you go to India and they sitting there bobbling their head. That's a part of their culture. And that means something. That's a sign of respect or something like that. Yeah, I don't know, but it means something.
It means something. They do it. They damn sure do it.
They do it. All of them don't have Tourette's. I mean, they don't have the tics. That's something they do.
Right.
So we have to accept it. And we're so ashamed to accept all this bad stuff that we just kind of laid over and let it happen to us. So we have to accept the fact that we sold out and became ultimate consumers instead of consumers and builders like everyone else. You see what I'm saying? So that's all I'm saying. And that's our battle, not white folks.
Yo.
Not capitalism. Our battle is consumerism.
Listen, we're going to have to, inshallah, pick this up, inshallah, next week. And because this is the crux of the conversation. And I think we need to, start to straighten some of this stuff out. And I think this is an important conversation. And we ran a little bit longer than we had anticipated. So inshallah, we'll I appreciate the conversation. And let's link up next week, inshallah.
Inshallah.
All right, fella. Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum.